Other day when we were in the desert, I finished my cup and I left it on the ground, and before going I took it with me. I'm doing this for myself, so I can respect the nature. You respect it to respect you back. So please guys, this is very important. Respecting the nature will help you get better photos and will help this nature preserve. That's a group of photos taken from the same location that we were in at that time. One of the most important things also you can do before starting your post-processing is to make a proper composition, so you avoid later on cropping as much as possible. You need your full frame of the picture. You don't have to crop and lose some details, good details here and there because you didn't get the tree position right, or you get the horizon a bit inclined or whatever. So adjusting such things and keeping such things in mind will result in much better post-processing and much better photos. And the most important thing is focus and sharpening. If you remember that day before yesterday, we spent like 1 hour talking about focus. I stressed on the focus because it's very important, because you will, when you go back home and you open the photo on the PC, you might see some of the photos which looked like it's in focus, you will find it's out of focus. So spending much time on doing a proper focus will also save you lots of time trying to sharpen and over-sharpen your photos to make it look good. So again, doing it right from the moment that you shoot will save you lots of time and effort in post-processing and will result in a much better photo. You agree with me? Unless you want to keep your things out of focus intentionally, like this photo, for example. I want to focus only on this lantern, and I want to keep the Milky Way out of focus. One thing else about focus, also using a proper tripod and all of that, the basic approach for any long exposure photography. Let's go back a little bit back in history. Before digital photography, there was still post-processing. And I will tell you why I'm trying to mention that to you later on. But what I'm trying to give you now, or to tell you now, is that there was, from day one of photography, there was a post-processing process. And it was such process being done and performed inside the darkroom itself. And most of the tools that we have now in the Photoshop are actually taken from real tools done in the darkroom, like the dodging and the burning. You can see here the burning tool in Photoshop is like a hand. It was done in this way in the darkroom before. And it's all about projecting your photo and exposing it in a certain time and trying as much as possible to reduce the highlights and raise the shadows and so on until you get a proper exposure. Masking also was there in the darkroom. And now we have it in the Photoshop. We can use it properly. There are many uses for masking. I'm talking about the legitimate use. Masking is there from day one, and it's very important to learn about masking. That's some examples about film post-processing. You can see here this photo. The sky was overexposed. The photographer here, and that's a very famous photographer. Can anybody recognize this photo? It's for Ansel Adams. So the sky here was overexposed. He cut a mask, and he did, while post-processing, he reduced the exposure of light on the sky until he get a good balanced sky. You can see also examples of dodging here and here, or playing with exposure. That's a full plan about what the photographer wants to do with his photo. So he wants to crop it from here. He wants to increase the brightness here. He wants to raise the shadows here. He put all his remarks, and this is actually the post-processing plan for a photographer before digital photography. This is the real aim now, why I'm talking about post-processing in the darkroom, because of ethics. We need to keep the ethics in post-processing. And I will attack myself. I will not attack anybody else. That's a photo. The first photo I took for the Milky Way back in 2013, 6 years ago. That's one photo. I was very happy with the result. I was amazed about the result at that time. And I took this Milky Way and I extensively started post-processing and as much as possible trying to get the details out of it. So far, this is okay. I did nothing more than that. After that, I thought to myself, why don't I take some foregrounds and put the Milky Way and blend it on it? And I did it. And I was amazed with the result. And then, after a while, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel right. I feel that there is something still missing. I'm not happy with that. So after I published those photos for a couple of weeks, I removed it back again, and I took an oath to myself that I will never do it again. I want to do it the hard way. So the real message that I want to deliver now, please, guys, don't extensively use or abuse the fine art. You got my point? So simply, you will respect yourself better. You will be happier with your results. Believe me, even if the results are a bit less than excellent, you will be much happier and appreciative to your results. Sometimes you see a photo which is too good to be true, right? We see it on Instagram. It's too good to be true. Come on, for God's sake. Why should we do this if we can do it the hard way? Let's do it the hard way, and you will feel much better in it. For example, this photo. I wanted to take Hatta mountains at dam with the Milky Way. So I did it the easy way. At that time, 2013, and I blended the foreground from the morning on the background from the evening. Okay? And the Milky Way was taken in Qudra, some totally different. Okay? So I said to myself, no, I want to take this shot the real way. And I kept on planning until I did it the real way. And it turned out to be much better as an output and as a value inside of me. So you got the message. Many people are trying to believe that doing such composite are okay. I personally believe it's not okay. And I'm supported by many organizations and photography organizations, starting with HIPAA themselves, with National Geographic, with all the big names in photography. They clearly tell you, please don't do this. And if you get caught, it will be, you will lose your integrity, you will lose your, the minimum things that you will lose, you will get out of the competition, if your aim is competition. All right? There is a very good topic about that by a photographer called Reefer. He's just saying to you, take it and don't fake it. You can go online and search for this article. It's really nice. So we want to take it. We want to take the shot, and we don't want to fake it. Right? So now we will talk today about post-processing of nightscapes. So landscapes at night. We will talk about how to deal with such photos, which is usually a single photo. You're trying to take a composition for features in the nature around you with the Milky Way or the stars. The second type of post-processing that we'll talk about today is how to do a panorama. I don't know if somebody tried it the other day. I'm sure somebody did. Panorama is very interesting to do, especially if you are limited with your focal length or you find very beautiful views that you don't want to miss any feature in it. So you want to take this as a whole scene, right? And the third one that we will talk about is the stacking of post-processing of astrophotography, and using a very simple tool that I will talk to you about. I will tell you exactly how to download it. And if we have some time, I will give you a hint about the deep sky stacking, which is a bit different from a normal astrophotography Milky Way shot. Suggested software. For RAW and JPEG editing, we need the Adobe Lightroom or Photoshop, which I guess everybody is having such softwares. We cannot live without it now. For stacking, we need Sequator or Deep Sky Stacker, and this is for Windows user. For a Mac user, you have Starry, I think Starry Landscape, which is very similar to Sequator. And there is another way you can just try to emulate Windows on your Mac machine and download such software. I personally do Windows because it's serving my photography editing better than Mac. I dealt with both, but I felt more comfortable with the Windows because of the limitations in software. Deep Sky Stacker is a bit more complicated than Sequator. It's very heavy. It can take you hours. Sometimes it hangs. So I rely nowadays on Sequator mainly because it's really very fast and very efficient. For panorama stitching, there is a very nice piece of software called Microsoft ICE, or Image Composite Editor. You can find it on such a link. And if you just Google it, you will find the link to download it. So let's start with the first one, which is the shooting and post-processing of Milky Way single shots landscape. Generally speaking, all what we need to do is a bit of adjustment to the white balance, the exposure, the highlights, the brightness, a bit of clarity, and the normal, regular settings that we need to do with the photo. I'll give you this example. That's a raw file, and that's a post-processed JPEG. As you can see, the editing is somehow very simple and to the point. You don't have to overcook it. You don't have to do some extremes on it. Just keep it simple as much as possible. I'll give you this photo as an example. Quickly, what we need to do. Mostly, I like to work with the camera raw editor in the Photoshop itself, which is almost exactly giving you every single options that you want. You don't have to load your photo itself in the Photoshop. You can work from this. This is a very important step that I want you to try to realize, which is the gradient filter. The use of gradient filter is very important because you can apply two different settings on two different portions of the photo. If you have any questions, guys, before I proceed, just tell me. We can stop and play it back again. The whole point is I want my sky to be a bit cold. I want my foreground to be a bit hot. And I want to raise the shadows only in the foreground. So the only way to do it efficiently is to do it through doing the gradient filter. You can still do it with a single settings, but you will end up with having halos around the edges. And we all see this in some photos. The next step is I want to adjust a bit the deformation that happened due to using the fish eye. So I'm using a transform warp in a very simple way. I'm trying to do it manually. Try to readjust the deformation of the lens, keeping the horizon straight. And why this happened? Because I want to get as much as possible out of the sky, so I leaned my camera upwards. Because it's a fish eye, of course, the whole thing was deformated. So it was a bit of tweaking. You can reach, in the end, a proper looking geometry as much as possible. And that's a very simple process. It took around like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you can be happy with it. Let's get more complicated. That's another sample of simple raw editing. Another also sample of post-processed and original raw file. Let's go now a bit more complicated into the panoramas, which is really interesting. It's having lots of tips that you can do with your photo. I will give you this example about this photo, which I really I love this photo because it reminds me of certain memories, special memories. This photo, I shot it like 6 years ago using this D800 and the 24mm lens. Exposure was basic, 30 seconds, aperture f2.8, by the book, 3200. The basic settings of the 14mm using the 500 rule that we talked about. I don't want to repeat those things. Let us focus only on the new knowledge. So what I did, I want to shoot the whole arc in one shot. I want to get this composition. With this lens, you can never get it in one shot, right? Even if you have a fish eye, you can hardly get it in one shot. At least in a fish eye, 180-degree fish eye, you can barely get it in 3 shots to get the whole arc. I want to compose the road to be in the middle. I have certain image in my head. I want to see it. I want to do it. I want to make it, right? So I can do it the easy way. I will go shoot the road, and then I will go back and try to make a composite and add it. Or I could do it the hard way, which is more valuable, right? So what I did, I put my 14mm on the camera and mounted on the tripod. I put in a vertical orientation. Vertical orientation will get you more of the sky and more of the ground. So somebody can tell me that I can do it on the other way around, and I can do it on a landscape orientation. Yes, I can do it, but it will create a bit of a hectic process that through experience, it's much better than to use it in a vertical orientation. So wide angle with a vertical orientation is the key aspect for getting a good panorama, okay? So I took the first row for the sky. I want to get the full Milky Way arc from the edge to the edge, from the right to the left. And then I leaned my camera at a lower angle, and I took the road and the tip of the Milky Way also with an overlap. And this is very important. You have to overlap your photos by minimum 25% in order to avoid later on errors that might happen during the stitching process. So the overlap is very important. Don't say to yourself, I will take less number of photos. For example, in this one here, I have 7 photos in the first row and 7 in the second row. Is it 7 or? Yeah, so total 14. Yes, 14 photos. So somebody can take it with less number of photos, but it might later on give you some errors in stitching. And this tutorial here will give you the full process of doing this photo from A to Z. So what I did, also using the camera raw editor, I opened the 14 photos in one single process. Now I have 2 types of editing I want to do. I want to do the sky, will have certain settings, and the other 7 photos, which is having the foreground and the sky, will have a bit different processing. All right? So I picked the ones with the sky, a little bit of more contrast, a little bit of more exposure, a bit of clarity, and be very careful using the clarity, because as much as it will give you good results with stars, it will give you halos, especially on the edges of the trees and in the horizon, which is going to be very bad. Second thing I want to do, I want to reduce the light pollution a little bit. So I did a brush with the camera raw editor, a brush, and I give it, I reduce the highlights and the exposures, and I only apply it to the area where there's some kind of light pollution. I will go to the second photo with the same settings. Second photo having the light pollution. As you can see, I'm not eliminating it 100%. I'm trying to reduce it a little bit. That's very important, dealing with the light pollution in the night photography. In this part of the sky, it is totally dark. You don't need to apply such element. And I think we all noticed in the same locations that we went that it's having the same light pollution area. The next thing I will do the other part of the photos, which is having the road. Again and again, this issue of having the gradient filter is very important. So I did 2 gradient filters, one for the foreground and one for the sky. The one for the foreground, it's colder, contrast a little bit more. For the road, foreground, it's hotter, and I raise the shadows a little bit. Then I will choose all the photos with this setting, and I will apply to such photos. Right-click, and I will choose everything, and then apply. So now I have the 14 photos done in the camera raw editor. And then I will select all and open it in Photoshop. If you have questions, tell me, guys. I will stop. And
So, when you made those 7 shots, did you take the panoramic first, or you were trying to match the location with the first shot and then adjust your cameras down?
I'll take the first row first, and then I will go back and start all over again.
In terms of matching your...
As much as possible. It shouldn't be perfect, but as much as possible, try to do it. You can get specialized heads, which will give you a perfect result. I used here a manual, a normal ball head, and I did it manually. It's not even, when you see single photos are not perfectly aligned horizontally. It's done in a way which is very rough and very easy. The point that I want you to know that you can overcome getting expensive heads and expensive panorama things, but you can still do it with the normal basic equipment. You got my point? Just if you maintain the concept of having a good overlap. A good overlap can save you lots of errors later on. So that's the point of not using professional heads, that the overlap, you do more overlaps, you do more number of photos, and you manage to get as much as possible an error-free photo. Now all the photos are opened in Photoshop. Then you will start saving, exporting all of the photos in a specific folder. That will also bring a very important topic. Try as much as possible to organize your photos. For example, we went the other day. I took 2 cameras, Z6 and 810. When I went back, I did 2 folders, each for each camera. And then inside each folder, for the Z6, I took 1 time lapse, so I called it time lapse 1, for example, tree number 1, and I put the photos inside. Then time lapse 2, tree number 2. Then foreground so, or the other way, or whatever. Try as much as possible to do folders and to organize properly your photos, so you can later on reach it easy and try to get as much as possible out of it. So organizing your photos is very important. So now we got our photos saved. The next thing now is to stitch it into one single panorama. So that folder now is having the JPEG processed shots. All right? I will now use the software that I told you about, which is Microsoft ICE, the free software. I will drag and drop the photos in it. I will use a simple panorama option. There are multiple options. Just use the simple one and press next. It will stitch the photos into one single image, and it will look very funny. You will be shocked that the photo looks very funny after it's finished. So it will require some adjustments. There are multiple types of projections. On the right side, there is cylindrical, Mercator, spherical. I always like to use the spherical one. Don't get complicated about it. Just use the spherical projection for panoramas. That is the closest way to get the image that you want. So the spherical projection. Try as much as possible to adjust the sky, and later on, if the foreground is deformed, I will show you what we will do with it. So that's the photo now, stitched. I will crop it. As much as possible, I will try to keep data, but I will crop the unnecessary parts, and then I will export the photo into one single photo. I will save it with a proper name. And I will close this software, and again, I will go back to Photoshop. This time, I will use the JPEG editing without using the camera raw. So that's the photo now. As you can see, it's having lots of issues still. It does not look like the end result of the other photo. The first thing that I like to always to do is to duplicate the layer, keep one layer with the original settings and original photo, and do the other one, the editing on it. The transform warp is very important for photographers, especially in the panoramas. As you can see, I'm trying now to adjust the horizon as much as possible manually. I'm trying to keep a straight horizon. The road still looks funny, but I'm trying to, as much as possible, to get close to the real life view. A bit of stretching to the sky. And somehow we are getting closer to the final result. Now I have still some issues. I have some dark areas here. I have some wrongly stitched areas here. You can see it. There's still some work to be done. So what I will do, I will create a mask for brightness. And creating it through mask, it's always good, so you can switch it on and off without applying it to the final image. Another layer of brightness, and see this trick. And then I will invert it, and I will try to eliminate the vignette that show in the stitching of the panorama. This is actually a vignette of the image. All right? It's coming in the stitched part. So what I'm trying to do now is to eliminate such vignette. It's a long process, guys. It's not an easy process, but believe me, it's very fun to do. And with simple tricks, you can do lots of things to your photo. So I created this brightness layer. I increased the brightness a little bit. Then I inverted such layer. I put the opacity of the brush like 20% or 30%, and I gradually try to eliminate the deformations that happened, or the imperfections that happened due to the vignette and the stitching marks. All right? Now I selected the lower part, and again back to transform warp, and I will try to adjust the yellow line of the horizon, or the they call it the projection line. Okay. Now we have an error here, stitching error. You can see the yellow line is not aligned perfectly. So what I will do, I will select this part. After selecting it, I will copy it. I will add it as a layer. And then again, transform warp. I love this feature. And I will try to align such lines again. Of course, all of such errors, if you have a professional panorama heads, it will be reduced. But still, I believe a bit more on post-processing, it will save me like $500, and I will get more experience in Photoshop. So what do you prefer? Right? So photography is not only for the rich, right? You can do it with whatever you have in your hand. You can still do a very good photo that Microsoft will buy from you, right? So that's a photo. So that's before and after. With the simple tricks, simple workflow, you reach the final image and you'll be happy with. The final one, I did some extra signature color effects, and that's the final one. You have a question? Yeah. Sorry to say, but don't use the panorama feature in the Photoshop. The amount of errors, the stitching errors that you will end up with is much more than the Microsoft Ice. I'm giving you the outcome of multiple years of practice. I started from Photoshop. I used every single panorama because I am really in love with panorama. I like always to capture everything around me. I don't want to lose any feature around me, okay, as much as possible. So what I used every single software you can imagine. So after all those years, I found the most efficient one is the free tool that is produced by some guy, engineer in USA who did as a graduation project, and then Microsoft bought this project from him, and it's keeping it in the download center in Microsoft. So it's a free software, but it's an error-free, and it's very fast. You can still use Photoshop, of course. All my respect to them, but my experience is, and I'm trying to hand over this experience to you. تفضل. Wallahi, Mac users, I feel pity for them. Look, there is a very good software, which is my second top-rated software, which is Autopano, Color Autopano, but it's a paid software, and it's for both Mac and if you get it, it's getting improved. It's getting improved extensively. I stopped doing panorama on Photoshop like 3-4 years ago. Adobe in general. Lightroom is better. You can do it from the raw even, right? Yes. From the camera raw, yes. Anyway, it's in the end your choice. You choose whatever you want, but I prefer this simple software. Again, in Mac, using the Autopano Color is very, very good, especially if you're doing 360. Lightroom, even Microsoft Ice or Photoshop will not do proper 360 VR photo. Autopano is very good at that. And that's a very broad subject. It's a totally different subject. I'm trying as much as possible here to touch the main aspect of panorama. I'll show you another example.
So, the question on the last shot. The Milky Way itself, did you distort the Milky Way, the shape of the Milky Way, to get this curve?
No, actually, what if you notice at one point of time when you shoot, the Milky Way is starting to rise, and it's across the sky, right? The Earth is a sphere, right? So the night sky is projected in a sphere shape. So in a matter of fact, it is having this shape. It's a straight line. Yani when you see the Milky Way itself, we are inside the Milky Way, okay? It's like a CD, like a disk. So we are inside this Milky Way. So you see it as a one full straight line. But because of the spherical shape of the Earth, when you look at the horizon, you will see it inclined at that shape. As it goes up, you will find this inclination reduce, and it will be like a straight line. I don't know if you noticed that at that day, but like 3 o'clock, it was perfectly straight line. So this shot was taken in June 2013, I think 2013 or 2014. And at that time, it was close to the horizon, and it was barely taking this shape. So answer of your question, I didn't do any deformation. This is how the Milky Way arc. But because you are using a panorama, 180 degree, of course, you're getting left to right and trying to cram it in one single photo, it will look like that. If you wear your VR and you project it on a VR projection, you will find it a totally different project. Okay? Yes? Yes. Yes, real color. And I will show you, if we have some time, I will show you. There are wonders inside the core of the Milky Way. There is pink, magenta, red, yellow, brown. There are strange color inside the Milky Way and the, generally speaking, inside any deep sky object. Now another photo, another example of taking a panorama. And I'm doing this just to deliver a message to you that sometimes composition, in order to get a good composition, you have maybe to lean a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right in order to get the exact composition that you want. I remember also in our workshop the other day, I can't remember the face because it was dark, but I said to one of the fellows, in order to get this shot, just try to take 3 shots. A little bit left, a little bit right, in order to get, because he was having, I think, like a 24 mm. So he was not getting the tip of the tree, and he was not getting the second tree. There was a view with 2 trees, so he was feeling like frustrated with his lens. So I told him, use this panorama feature, and you will end up having the lens that you want. So this photo, for example, I was in this scene. I traveled thousands of kilometers in order to reach this area in Egypt from UAE. And I went to this lonely mountain, and there is a very long story about this mountain. We can talk about it later. This mountain and this lonely tree is there, and I want to get the shot with the Milky Way, and I want to get the composition perfect. So what I did, I took the middle shot first, and I felt that the photo is just very cramped. The elements inside the photo are full, right? You feel that there is something wrong. First of all, the mountain is not closing with the horizon properly, okay? And you feel that the tree is exactly at the edge of the photo. I want a little bit of space from the right and from the left. And I was using a 12 mm fisheye. It's a very wide lens. Okay? So what I did, I took a bit to the left and a bit to the right, and I took those 3 photos. And then I will stitch it in panorama. The same process that we did a while ago. I will take the 3 photos inside the camera raw editor. I have certain settings I want to do on the foreground and certain settings I want to do on the background. I will select all the photos together. As you can see, again, I'm doing this gradient filter tool. First to the sky, raising a little bit the brightness, making the white balance a bit colder. All right. And then another gradient filter to the foreground, raising the shadows and making it warmer. Always the ground is warm and the sky is cold. So in order to get this perfect balance, you have to make it individually. I'm repeating this tool more and more and more so you can realize that this is a very important tool. Then select all, synchronize. Now, because the horizon is not perfectly aligned like in the whole photo, so I'm just aligning the gradient filter again to match the area that I want to apply on it. Select all and open in Photoshop. A bit of contrast before we go. Sky there in this place is very dark, very, very dark, so you can get amazing details of the Milky Way. It's even darker than the locations that we went last time. Now I have the 3 photos opened in Photoshop. I will export it as JPEG and stitch it again using the same process. Saving each photo individually, you can either do it manually if it's a small number of photos, or you can export it as a batch conversion if you have multiple photos. The JPEG are in the same location. Now I will use the AutoPano software, the one I told you about a while ago. Okay? So Microsoft Ice. Let's now see how we will do it in AutoPano. That's the Color AutoPano. It's a very professional software. It's a paid software. And what you will do, you will just drag and drop again your photos. The same process. It will give you projection, panorama projection settings. I will always choose the spherical type of projection. Again, it will look very funny when it's stitched. I will go to the projection settings. As you can see, spherical, cylindrical, all the same type of projections. Here you can see the difference in applying such projections. Most likely the spherical or the fish eye are the closest to the end result that I want to achieve. I'm not worried about the deformation that happened in the sky. I will deal with it later with the magical transform warp. So exporting this photo into a JPEG file. Again, duplicate the layer. Always keep the original guy to compare with. Now I'm doing my composition. The whole issue about doing this panorama is to get a proper composition, right? Almost perfect. I just want to stretch it a little bit here and there to, that's much better than using the masking and using the healing brush and using the fill, right? Just use your own photo to cover for areas like this. So what do you prefer? I can select this black areas and I can edit and fill. But it will result in some fake fill. Something is not there. It will copy it from somewhere else. Or I will just stretch it and consider it as either I'm dealing with the deformation or I'm adding more deformation. But in the end, it's one single photo with nothing, no external objects added to the photo, or much better than doing the healing brush, or much better than doing the fill. Yes?
The bright star on the right side, is it Jupiter?
That's Venus. Yeah.
Because it looks like Jupiter. You said us
Yeah.
previous day that was Jupiter.
We are really lucky at that day because Jupiter was there. We focused on it easily. Sometimes there is no planet and you can never focus easily. Jupiter is there, and sometimes it depends on of course, the rotation, and the stars are always, the planets specifically are always rotating in a different pattern than the other sky objects. So it's really amazing to see such planets in the night sky. So that's the photo, and the composition that I want is achieved. So just a bit of a small tip. Look at this photo and look at this photo. It's the same exact location. But look at the composition of this tree. The tree is very small. It's a very small tree. You can never imagine how small it is. It's like this height. One single tree. So what I did in order to get this, I just removed my tripod. I got a very small tripod, and I leaned on the ground, and I tried to take this angle. Always with trees, try as much as possible to get the trunk of the tree above the horizon. So you get the bush itself above the horizon. When you have this this effect here, or this composition here, it doesn't look good to the eye. You got my point? So the horizon line with the tree in the middle, it's not good. It doesn't feel good. Still, the second photo is nice, but I prefer this, of course. And the small story behind this mountain, And this lonely tree, there was one warrior in World War II. He was driving his plane, a German plane, along with two other fighters, and it was hit by British forces, and it fell into this area in Al Fayoum, western district of Egypt. And this guy, the other two guys died at once, and this guy remained alive for some time. It's not exactly known how much time he survived, but he carved his name on the mountain, and he put the details of the plane. And until today, you can go and visit his grave in this area. And you feel like this single mountain in the middle of the desert and this single tree is like some kind of a memorial for his soul, which died for nothing. Again, from the same location, a bit different area away from this mountain, there is this Wadi al-Hitan, which is at one point of time, like millions of years ago, it was a floor of an ocean. And this ocean is having lots of sea creatures and water creatures. And it's having a very distinctive whale, which is a magnificent whale, which is exactly the phase between the animal and the current whales that we know. So it was having actually some hands before developing it into the final figure of the whales that we have right now. So this single shot is actually also a panorama of multiple shots. Four shots, vertical orientation, again, to get as much as possible from the sky and from the ground. Because it's a fish eye, I don't have to do 2 layers or 2 rows, like the one I did before. Again, doing the same process. It's nothing new, so I can, if you want, I can skip this part. If you want to see it, just tell me. Let's skip it. You want to keep it? Yes, tell me. Noise reduction. I barely use it. If you notice now how many photos we've seen together, I barely use the noise reduction. Why don't we have some noise in the photo? What is the problem of having some noise? ISO is adding noise. Okay, let's keep it. No problem. Okay, it does it. You know, back in the days, during film, they used yes, and they used to get special films which will produce such noise, which is a high ASA film, they call it. And it was some kind of an effect. I'm not saying that you have to have your photos noisy, but there is no harm of raising a little bit the ISO and getting some noisy results than to have an underexposed photo. And in the end, you can avoid the noise by doing the next trick that we will talk about, which is stacking. The concept of noise. What is the concept of noise? Noise, it's the sensor that you have in your camera is very sensitive to heat, not only to light. Okay, so it's a machine, and it's a gear working, and it's heating up, and it's affected by also the environment, which is sometimes hot. We were talking before the start of this session that shooting the Milky Way in the summer is totally different from the winter, because also in the summer you will have more noise because of the heat. So this sensor is picking up heat patterns, okay, and it's somehow it's arbitrary. It's not constant. So every single photo you will have the noise located in a different area. So there are ways to deal with this noise, and I will show you, if we have some time, I will show you how to deal with it. This one specifically, I don't have a tutorial for it. I'm just showing it without a video. What's your question?
How did you get the light on the mountain in that last shot?
I just overexposed the foreground. So, for example, I broke. Yeah, there is a gradient. You will expose the shadows a little bit, but I will show you one trick after also a couple of slides. You can take different settings for the foreground and take 2 minutes shot for the foreground, okay? And then you can, for the background, you can take the settings, different settings for the light and the sky, and then you can blend both of them. There is one example on it. Actually, lighting the foreground is very important. It's very important, specifically in astrophotography, and that's why sometimes the light pollution is a privilege. Light pollution is coming from the city is actually lighting the and shading some light on the. There are some techniques.
So you don't use any infrared light for that?
I barely use it. I barely use it because it will look like there is something added to the shot, but you can still use it. You can hold the flash with your one bare hand, and you can just press the button of the flash externally without attaching it to the camera, and you can have some light on the foreground. Okay, you can get a light painting tool, and you can do light painting, and if you do it properly, it will end up with very good results. But usually, and there is a technique, low light painting, where you can, in pitch black areas, you can never get any light on the foreground. It's very, very hard to get some light on the foreground. So there are lots of ways, but still, if you are using extreme long exposures, you can get more light, right? In some areas, even the Milky Way and the stars will bring some shadows, not only lights. You will see shadows from the starlight, but it depends on the exposure. This photo is a part of a 360 photo. Okay, just a portion of a 360 photo. A 360 full photo is 12 photos plus 2, one for the sky and one for the ground, Z and N, and this is the 12 mm focal length. So if you want to use 14, it will be a bigger number of photos. So this is just part of the scene. As you can see, I'm always, this is 270 degrees. So you're getting the full east to west and part of the north, almost 270 degrees to get this single shot. Let's look at this one now. This is a 24 mm lens. I use the f1.4. f1.4 will let me use lower ISO, right? Which will end up with low noise. So dealing with the noise, also you can use a faster lens. Now we are very privileged that ISO is really becoming progressed very fast. In the late cameras that were released in the last couple of years, the ISO performance is becoming very good, right? And as I told you, it's not about the megapixel. You want to get lower noise, get lower megapixel. So it's about the balance between the details of the you will get from a high megapixel and the details you will get from eliminating the noise. So in my opinion, between 20 and 30 is a perfect megapixel. Above that is extreme. I have the D850. It's 46 megapixels. It's a magnificent camera. For astrophotography, I rely more on the 810 or even now the 750 and the Z6, which is 2021 or 22. It's much better results. So back to this photo. This location is the end of the road that we traveled and take our photo shoot. There is a small village there. They call it Arabian Night Village. It's a resort. It's like a safari camp, a more sophisticated safari camping area. And they have this beautiful huts, which is really, I fell in love with it when I saw it. So I went there in the middle of summer. There was nobody there. There was nobody at that village except for me and my wife and kids. So we spent the 2 days there. I asked the guys from the management of the hotel to turn off as much light as possible so I can shoot. Just a minute, we have some kind of glitch. So I can shoot such buildings with the Milky Way. And as you can notice, there are still some lights. Just let us fix this issue. يلا عدباتها على طول. All right. So let's talk about details about this photo. It's the number of photos I took to end up with the final results. So it's a 12 photo using the 24 mm. All right. As you can see, I'm overlapping as much as possible to reduce the amount of mistakes and errors that will happen from the software. Let's now go into the process of doing this panorama. I'm copying the path and pasting it to go directly to the folder, selecting the photos. Camera raw editor, as usual. Dealing with the settings. If you can see, I don't want to do much work on it. ISO is 1000, 25 seconds, f1.4. The sky region areas, I will try to make it colder. It's a bit more magenta. Increasing the shadows. The foreground is really dark, except for the huts. As you can see, there is a small light coming from the pathway of this hotel, which is making a very nice effect on the huts, but it is differential. So the lower part of the hut is totally dark, but the upper part is yellow. So I will save the 12 photos. So both the RAW, the JPEG, and the XMP files are in one folder. I think something went wrong. Okay. So again, using the Microsoft ICE. Projection is spherical. That's the difference between each of the projections, as you can see. Fisheye, sometimes it looks very closest to the final results that I want. Look at the perspective projection. It's really nice. It will give you the sense of a real-life view. So I will end up with the proper projection. I will open the best settings I can do and export it into a one JPEG file. Going to Photoshop, duplicating the layer. Again, stretching the ends to get rid of those cropped, those extra black areas, and trying to adjust the deformation of the photo as much as possible. Everything is manual. And you can do it on steps. You don't have to do it from the first step. So you can do it and then again try to, in the second step, to localize the transform warp on certain areas until you get the, so for example, that's a crop I want to use. I will get rid of the other areas. As you can see, the vignette coming from the photos is also clear here. That dark areas here are caused by the vignette. So eliminating all the those dark areas by doing the same trick that I did in the previous photo, by applying one layer of brightness. Okay, sorry. Okay. I think the PC wants to take a break. So the same concept, eliminating such vignette areas and dark areas and getting rid of all the darkness, the same process that we did in the previous one. I will put the full featured video in my YouTube channel later on if whoever wants to see it in details. Now you have the choice. Do you want to take a break now and later on we can continue? Anyway, we are going to take a second break at 7 o'clock so we can have the prayer for Maghrib. Okay? Let's do it.
When you edit a photograph in camera raw, like Lightroom, does it permanently
No, the raw is still untouched. That's the beauty of using the raw. There is a small file called XMP file. Can you, if you notice that file, this XMP file, it's actually Hello? Hello. So let's resume for one more, like 1 more hour, less than 1 hour, 45 minutes, so we can pray and then resume back. Now the interesting part, which is stacking. Stacking. And I will give you some examples from the White Desert of Egypt. And I will give you some examples from the same location that we went to the other day. I went to this location. I discovered this location like more than a year ago. My problem with Razin, or the empty quarter, that there are almost no trees, except for some trees on the road itself. But if you want to go inside the desert, you can barely find any tree. So that location, the privilege about this location is those skinny trees, which is really beautiful. And it's not a regular tree like other trees. So stacking is a really magnificent technique that will reduce noise. So it will reduce noise. It will add up contrast and color details as you can never imagine. And the more you stack, the more you'll get deeper into details, and you can again take it to a second level of post-processing. So that's the beauty of stacking. So in stacking, we did the other day a simple stacking. We tried to take 10 photos, 20 photos. Sometimes you do stacking up to 1,000 photos, 500 photos, 250 photos. It depends also on what you are shooting. On a regular landscape or a nightscape, we don't need that kind of number, 200 or 300. You just need like 20, 30 maximum. But for deep sky, the more you stack, or the more data you collect, the more details you will get, and the more flexibility you will do on post-processing. The problem with post-processing that if your photo is noisy, you cannot go and increase the brightness and shadows, right? So what happens when I do stacking? I reduce this noise, so I can stress and push the limits onto my brightness and shadows and contrast and all of that. So it's a balance between noise and doing the other things. You got my point? So that's the beauty of stacking. And there are many softwares that do stacking. Start with a simple landscape, astroscape, nightscape. There are multiple names to this beautiful genre of photography, which I really love. Specifically the nightscapes, because it's a landscape taken at night. So you are mixing between the beauty of the land and the nature with the stars and the magnificent sky. In the morning you have sunrise, you have clouds, but in the night you have millions of stars, which is really magnificent. In this particular date, it was in September last year, and there was a moon at that time. And both of the moon and the Milky Way were setting after sun set by like a couple of hours. So I went at that location, same spot in the daylight. It was in September, the end of the Milky Way season. And it was like 20% illuminated moon, which is very good to the foreground, and it's adding one element into your photo. So although the moon is over or jumping on the brightness and the details of the Milky Way, but it's adding a value to the photo, right? So it's something different. So this photo is 25 seconds, ISO 2000. As you can see, ISO, I didn't push it to the limit because it's already lit by the moon. So I don't need the 3000, 4000, right? So now this is the trick. With the moon, I get more light. I reduce the noise, reduce the ISO, reduce the seconds. The D810A is the Nikon camera, which is specialized in astrophotography. The only difference between this camera and any other camera that it's having a special sensor which is more resistant to heat, and it's having some filters to see more reddish and more luminous nebulosities in the sky. And it's really a magnificent piece of tool. There are specialized astrophotography cameras in the market, but this is really a nice little camera. So what I did, I took 10 shots, okay, of this single photo with the previous settings that I told you about. All right? So 10 shots. And we will go through now the details of the post-processing of such 10 shots in order to reach a magnificent result, right? So the 10 raw shots, and I'm using raw, guys. I can use the JPEG with the sequator, but I'm using the raw. Raw will give you better processing. So don't be tempted by converting it to JPEG first and then use the sequator. Directly try to use the raw files. And that's the beauty of sequator or any other stacking software. Try to focus quickly here, please. So this is the left menu. I drag, or I included the star images or the light images. The sky region, it's not a full sky region, right? So there is sky and there is a foreground or a still objects, which is the tree and the ground. So now I will do what? I will mask out the sky. Okay? I'm masking now the sky. So I'm telling the software that this is the part which is having a moving object, a star, and I want you to stack it upon each other. But because what will happen? It will recognize the particular star in the particular constellation, and it will overlap it on each other and stack it on each other. Okay? So now I want to eliminate the tree because I don't want the tree to be stacked. It's not a starry area, right? So I'm reducing the brush size now, and I'm fine-tuning the horizon, and I'm trying now to eliminate the tree from the equation. Okay? If you have a question, tell me, guys. So now I did the mask. With the right click, you will eliminate, you will do a negative mask. With the left click, you will do the, or the other way around, and then I'm reducing now the size of the brush and trying to eliminate also the trunk of the tree. So there was one question about stacking with the presence of the tree. It's very hard, and it will show you some challenges after you finish. There will be some halos, but we will deal with it. The most important thing, I want my Milky Way to be stacked. That's the ideal outcome that I want. Here, there are a couple of options. Auto brightness. Now it will stack. I will show you the options. The sky region is partial, and I did the masking. Auto brightness, I will keep it on. High dynamic range on. Remove dynamic noise on. Reduce distortion effects, which will tell you if you are using a telephoto lens or a wide angle. So we will just use the wide angle. It will know that there is a certain deformation that will happen or distortion will happen with this particular lens, and it will try to avoid this distortion and fix it for you. Okay? And the other three options I don't need to do anything about. Then I will press start. Okay? So I put the star images, the data here. Noise and vignette is something else. We can talk about it later. Output, I will exactly tell the software where the output will be. And then I will do the stacking process. That's a real-life timing, by the way. It's not a speed-up process. That's only to show you how fast is this software. So 10 photos. It was stacked in like 2 minutes. Other softwares could spend tens of minutes until you'll be able to do it. Now I have the TIFF file, which is almost like a raw picture, very dense picture. All right? And I will open one single photo, a normal photo, and I will show you the difference between them. So this is the stacked, and this is the single photo. I will do some processing on the single photo. I will raise the shadows, a bit of dehaze. I think this lighting is affecting. Can we switch it off, please? Is it better like that? Yes. Yeah, much better. So as you can see now, I'm trying to post-process one single photo. It still looks lovely. I love it. It's a very good photo. Composition is nice, moon, and everything looked very good. Look at this trick. I did a brush, and I reduced the shadows and the contrast, or sorry, the exposure, and I selected the moon to try to reduce the illumination. Understand what I'm doing now? I'm trying to balance the dynamic range between the overexposed or the brightness of the moon and the surrounding area. By the way, our eye are having much more dynamic range than any other camera. That's why when you are at night, you can see the feature of the moon. Even if you have your mobile with you, or you have your, if you can see some street lights or city lights, you can still see the features of the moon. In order to take the same shot with the camera, you have to take multiple shots. So I did the basic thing that we talked about. Now that's the TIFF stacked file. I will open it with the Camera Raw editor. So I did processing on one single photo, and I opened it. Now I'm processing the TIFF file. I'm trying now to adjust the colors. Sometimes the stacking will a bit destroy or affect the color correction. If you can see, the mask is showing here, right? There are some bright halos around the trees, which is the areas that I deselected from the mask. And the other areas supposedly are stacked. You cannot see the difference now, but you will feel it after a bit. Now I'm adjusting I'm doing some kind of color correction. The perfect recipe between the temperature and the tint and the dehaze. As much as possible, try to go back again and do it all over, and go down and do it and until you get the desirable effect. Now a small brush tool, and I will make it a bit cold and reduce the exposure on it, and then go to such halos and try to eliminate those halos. Can you see it? It's disappearing now, right? Okay, as much as possible. Let me go through it, the whole, and see, it's a brush. I selected this brush. Okay, so we have to repeat it anyway. No problem. Let's go back and do it. So I opened the TIFF file with the Camera Raw editor. Okay. As you can see, there are halos around the trees. What I did, this brush tool, you can pick up the brush tool, select this brush tool, and try to equalize all the settings, neutralize all the settings in this brush tool. Okay, and then reduce the exposure a little bit, because I want to do a reduction in exposure, right? That's what I want to do. And then I will go and brush and paint the lit area or the halos around the trees until I eliminate it. Using the brush. Look, Camera Raw editor is a magnificent tool. It can give you everything you want. You can do the same with the Photoshop itself. You can do a mask of brightness and reduce it and invert it, and you can do lots of ways. There are multiple ways to do the same thing. But in Camera Raw, it's having everything inside. So as you can see, I'm using this brush tool extensively. Now I want to increase the contrast on the Milky Way. So I did another brush. I increased the clarity, the dehaze, and the contrast. it looks now a bit way above normal. So I will balance it again. I will select the same brush that I did, and I will go fine tune. I don't want to extremely pop up the Milky Way so it will cross being natural, and I will overdo it. We don't want to overdo our settings or our post-processing, but I want to do some selective processing to the Milky Way itself, especially that I stacked it. When I stacked it now, I reduced the noise, and you can see there are some colors appearing, which are natural colors, are not colors that we tricked. It's a natural color, just a result of the stacking process. You can see the difference now between the single shot. Look at the noise in the single shot, and look at the stacking. Can you see the difference? A big difference. See the amount of details in this area, the dark and brown and all of those areas. You cannot see it in the previous photo. Look at the reddish areas here. I hope you got what I want to tell you about the stacking.
Trying to make with the adjustment brush in the normal picture without stacking.
Yes.
Can't you get those colors also?
You can never get it the way you got it now with stacking. You can still get some, but those colors did not come only from the brush tool that I used. It came originally from the stacking. Now you saw the difference in noise between both. It's extreme. Extreme, believe me, it's extreme. Now there is a bit of trail in this image. If there is no trail, you can even take a bigger number of or larger number of photos, and you can get even better, less noise. You can get magnificent results. A crisp, clear photo equivalent to like 100 ISO and like 200 seconds.
30 seconds was too long?
25 seconds, actually. Why it's too long?
With your rule, you just told me you got trails, right?
But it was a 14 mm.
Right.
So strange. So it's still showing the thing that is updated recently in this rule, the 500 rule, is the megapixel. So for example, if I'm having a D750, okay, D750 is having 24 megapixel or 25 megapixel, right? And I'm having a D850, which is almost 46. I cannot use the same exposure. Imagine that. So in the 14 mm on the D850, I have to use only 20 seconds in order to get a trail-free Milky Way shot. But on the 750, I can put it up to 30 seconds. So it's not only the focal length. And so some guy introduced this study. I can't remember his name, but he's a genius guy who added this to the equation. It's just a function between all those aspects that we talked about. Now you can see the final image. It's much different than the original image. Look at the details of the Milky Way and the colors. Look at this small dot, which is the Lagoon Nebula. It's a magnificent nebula inside the Milky Way. A bit of light, and then we will turn it off again. Now that's a comparison, a quick comparison between stacked and non-stacked. Can you see the difference? Let's take the same example, but using one more additional technique. This is taken in a place called Aqabat, White Desert, Wadi Aqabat. It's, in Arabic, it's called obstacles, because it's, this wadi or this valley is full of big monuments of rocks, which are acting like an obstacle in front of all the I don't know how do you call it, in the qaba'il and all those journeys of commerce, and so they can never go into this wadi because it's full of such features, which happens to be a very good feature for photography. As you can see, it's a magnificent place. You can find red, you can find yellow, you can find white, you can find brown, black, all in the same location. Arcs, caves, I was amazed when I went there in this place, and it's really magnificent. It's pitch black, dark. For example, this photo, I went specifically in August, and you can see the 4 planets, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn in one single image with the Milky Way. I went there and I put my camera in one of the caves. I kept it from sunset to almost sunrise, and I ended up with a beautiful time lapse, which I'm still didn't finish yet. This place is really magnificent. It's around 6 hours from Cairo. And we camped in this area and we stayed the night there. It's magical. And this is the unfinished time lapse. It will give you just a glimpse about the beauty of this location. It's a beautiful place. Thank you. The good thing about the night sky that Orion is opposite exactly to the core of the Milky Way. So the Milky Way is rising, Orion is setting. And when the Milky Way core is setting, Orion is rising. So it's the winter opposite of the core of the Milky Way. So it's a beautiful.
One day or one night or
That's one night.
one night.
So I used 3 cameras. I put one camera on this side, one camera on the other side, one camera in the cave. I was running like crazy. I want to get as much as possible out of this location. I'm only spending 2 nights there. I traveled from UAE to Egypt to go to this place and try to get them as much as possible. So it's a beautiful place. Let's take this as an example now. I will do stacking, and I will do one more trick, which is differential settings on the foreground and the background as a trick also to do a perfect photo as much as possible. So let's talk about the background, which is mainly here, the sky. I took 30 seconds, f2.8, ISO 4000, and 14 mm, of course, with the D810A. Then I have 120 seconds of the foreground, so I lean my camera to get as much as possible from the foreground. As you can see, it looks good here, but when you look at the ground, you feel that you cannot hide it from your scene. You want to get this feature also inside, right? So what I did, one shot for the sky, one shot for the ground. But the shot for the ground, I use the intervalometer, 120 seconds, f2.8, ISO 1250. So a less ISO and more. I don't care about the trail because I want to use only the focus on the ground. And I refocused my camera on the foreground. Okay? Ideal way is to take 3 shots. To take one focused in this area, one in this area, and then one to the sky. I did 2 shots at that day, which was enough for me. The next step, the background photo, I took it for only 4 photos, enough with the clarity of the sky. it was enough to take 4. I could take 10 and 20, but I wanna use my time. Time is very precious, and you want to get as much compositions as you can. You can focus okay on one composition, but I'm looking around me and I'm feeling like really crazy. I cannot not take this rock or this cave, so I wanna take as much as possible. So I took only 4 shots. So 4 times 30 equal 120 seconds, right? The stacking is adding up to the exposure. So as if you are taking one single photo for the sky of 120 seconds. But the good thing about it, you will not get a trail, okay? Because it is stacking the stars above each other, right? So almost the same settings, 120 seconds, 120 seconds. All right? There is a typo. It's 1250. It's not 4000 ISO. Next step, let's now deal with the foreground and the background. So again, stressing on the fact that you have to organize your files, make separate folders. Now I'm using Sequator on the background. So I will browse to the background folder, all right? And I will deal with the stacking of the single photos. I will choose the raw images. Again, use the raw with the Sequator. Don't use the JPEG. And then I will choose where should I save my file, and I will name it. It's not like other photos, other softwares. You have to pick up the name and to pick the destination of the file. And then in the settings, this is very important, the composition, I will freeze the ground. That's a very good option with the Sequator. So I will freeze the ground, and then I will mask out the sky. It's easier here because there are no trees, right? So now I will do it quickly, and then I will fine-tune around the edges. And when you press freeze ground, it will stack also the ground. Okay? So because if you didn't check this option, you will find in the end the ground is hazy and moving, or blurry, not hazy. Because you are fixing the movement of the sky, so we'll get the ground moving. So in this option, you freeze both. Okay, fine-tuning the mountains. You need some patience as much as possible. You don't have to make it perfect, but at least as much as possible, try to get it right. Perfection sometimes happens with an 80%. It's not 100%. And even in engineering, and when I get a report of an 80% accuracy, I consider it 100%. I don't have to get it 100%. This is nonsense. 100% is for losers. Let's stick with the 80. Really, let's stick with the 80, and you will be a superstar. Because we are human beings. 100% you can never achieve. Auto brightness on, high dynamic range on, and I'm using the complex, which is the wide angle, to reduce the distortion effect of the lens. The dynamic range, dynamic noise, I will put it as an on also. It will reduce further the noise, and then I will stack it. So I'm stacking the 4 photos now. So open it in Photoshop. That's the final result, a TIFF file. As you can see, it's a bit bright, but the brightness does not lose the details, as you can see. Still, it is detailed in the bright areas. Look at the colors. Now it will get more and more vivid as you balance the exposure. Look at the amount of colors. I didn't do any kind of brush, anything. I'm just playing with the contrast. The colors are so vivid and so clear. The dehaze tool is very nice, but it adds lots of noise. So if you don't have a clean image, it will not work properly. If you have a noisy image, it will be disastrous. So the dehaze, you have to use it with very, yes?
Much better if you can use adjustment before we go to sequence.
No,
So will not produce more.
no. Use equator with raw. Yeah.
Or TIFF file. No. Can you
It's an output of the sequator, and then you take it after the stacking process to the Photoshop. I don't know if I get your question right or no, but
question is, let's work on the raw file, Lightroom, for example.
yes,
Import it as a TIFF file, then import it as a sequence.
I
It will not produce more noise.
look
After you
personally my own experience. I found out that this is the best way to do it, but there could be multiple ways of doing everything, and you can try it and tell us how it will look like.
about noise matter.
Let's try it. Try it and tell me what. But in the end, that's let's call it a certain approach of doing things. You can do it differently. You can do it this way. You can do it another way. Can you see now the difference between both the single shot and the? I think that's the single shot and the other one, right? Right. Now we did the sky. Okay. Let's work on the. I'm saving the file, and now I want to work on the foreground. It looks already nice. The photos, it's okay. As is, it's good. But still, the ground is having some features which is very strange in this area. Geologically, it's really very rich. You can find rocks and some calcium rocks and hard rocks and red sand. Somehow, it's somehow close to Maliha area, a little bit like Maliha, where you can find this beautiful mix of sand and. Basically, I have two shots actually for the foreground, one minute and the other one is 2 minutes. So I'm using both, and then later on I decided to go with the 2 minutes. As you can see, the amount of noise is very less because it's low ISO, 1250 ISO, 60 seconds. And the other shot is 120 seconds, 1250. All right? What? Okay. Now let's open both photos into one single file, and let's do some magic in order to blend it together. Now, do you call this a legitimate blending, or do you call it a manipulation? You are adding two photos. Yes, it's a composite image. It's defined as a composite image, but it's taken from the same spot, with the same camera, by the same in the same timing, even in the same tripod spot. You did not even move your tripod. So I consider it as a panorama, for example, right? So now I'm trying to align. I reduce the transparency on one layer. I'm trying a little bit to align the image as much as possible. Now I have to recrop to get the, it looks now like a medium format shot, a square shot. So opacity is done like this in order just to align. I'm using, again, my favorite tool, the transform warp, in order to correct the deformation. I will not move. I feel like when I'm moving, I will hold my breath. Okay, so transform warp. I'm trying to align the features on the mountain, on the horizon, as much as possible. Although it will not affect the area of blending, but at least I will get it right from the first time, as much as possible. Again, the 80% rule. Now it's aligned, but you can feel that the foreground is way brighter than the background. So we have to do something about that. Now I added a mask, as you can see. I added one mask to the foreground and projecting the background. So now I'm having almost the image ready, but still I'm having a differential brightness. So I added one mask of brightness and reducing the brightness on the foreground. I want to make it look natural. It's a night photo. It's not a day photo. I'm having some imperfections here from the gradient blending. So I'm now using a brush in order to just fix the blending properly. Allow me to sit for a while. I still have my back from the trip. That's the problem with astrophotography. You'll get bruises, you'll get back pain like hell. See, so I'm now trying to fine-tune the mask as much as possible. I'm not adding any new feature. I'm just trying to adjust the masking to get the features of the ground. Now I reduce the size of the brush to fine-tune the edge of this feature here. This white, I don't know what they call it in geology, like I think it's formed of calcium. It looks like chalk. And blended with the sand in a beautiful way. So I'm trying now to get this original shape. So that's the final image. There is a small spot here, which should be fixed. So as you can see, that's the see, I'm now fixing this small spot, adjusting again with the transform warp. And you have the whole scene in front of you. The upper part of the sky is 4 photos, 30 seconds, 120 seconds, and the lower part is 120 seconds. So you have a 120 seconds photo with much less noise, a little bit of contrast in the end on the overall photo. Who asked me about the signature? Sometimes it's a very simple contrast, again, you do to the final photo. But there is a, I will show you later on the things that I did to the other photo, and then saving it as a JPEG, and that's it.
Now image resolution is high now.
Sorry?
Image resolution is high now. The tool crop is down now.
Yeah.
Added the one picture more now. Resolution is high now.
Yes, it's very high, yes. It looks like a media format now, because the media format is a square one. So that's the process of doing this technique. Let's take a break again for praying, and then we still have some tutorials. Yes? Yeah, you can open it anywhere. TIFF file. TIFF file, you can open it anywhere you want, right? A TIFF file can be opened in both Lightroom and... I hope you are enjoying so far, guys. And let us just have quickly our let's make it only 7 minutes, not more than this, so we can go back and I'm still having Hello? Can you hear me? So we talked about the making of this photo. Now that's the night sky. That's the same one shot or one still image from the time lapse that I showed you a while ago, where I pointed my camera towards the other direction of the sky, which was the north, and the rise of Orion. So in this one particular shot, see the amount of deep sky objects you can find. That one here is called California Nebula. And they called it like that because it looks like California, the state of California. Pleiades. In Arabic, they call it Al-Thuraya. Rosette Nebula. It was a small dot red image or object which was rising at that time. And Orion. So the sky, the deeper you go inside such sky, the more amazing things you will discover. And you can never find proper wording of describing the magic and the beauty of such objects. That shot was taken here in Wadi Shawka area, inside a water dam. It's a very famous location for bikers, mountain biking, and for all the guys who like to go camping and do some sports.
Is it dark enough there?
It's like, let's say it's like 60%, 70% dark. It's not as Razin, of course, regretfully. There are lots of light pollution, and it's getting worse every year because there are new roads which is opening, and there are lots of airplanes. Yes?
Is there any book or how can we inform about this poetical, how do you call it?
The deep sky objects. Repeat your question again, please.
Is there any book or how can we get more information, exact location about these?
Are we talking about the dark locations to shoot, or we are talking about the deep sky objects?
About the objects.
The deep sky
Yeah,
objects.
that were before, slide before.
Yeah. There are some softwares and applications. Last year, in December 2017, we, again with HIPAA, there was one lecture I did, and I talked about the applications and the softwares. I think you can still browse it on the YouTube. And on my website, you will find also some details about such applications. But now you can just search in the marketplace, either it's Apple or Android. You can just search for Sky Map, Star Map, any of those keywords, and you can get a small application. You download this application, and you can browse the sky around you, either at that point of time or in time in the future, and you can search for such beautiful objects, and you can zoom in. There is a software called Stellarium on Windows and on iPhone and on Android, which is a magnificent software. Sorry? والماك إيه. So the deeper you go, the more amazed you will be, and the more tiny you will feel you are, and the more you will despise streets and cities, and you will want more to go towards the desert and back to nature, because that's the only place you can see such beautiful scenes. That's a group of time lapses also in United Arab Emirates. I'm getting deeper and deeper into the sky. I'm showing this tiny dot, the pinky dots that we all see in the Milky Way. It's a magnificent creation. Let's do it all over. I want you to see this. Let's have some patience. Some technical glitches always happen. I'll give you one example. Today I was just finalizing. I just want to copy the presentation into the flash drive. And every single glitch happened. The hard disk got warmed up and it started to hang and it's not working. The computer is hanging. The flash drive is not working properly. My son just came back from a swimming class, or he was going to a swimming class, so he just held his hard disk with my hard disk with his hand, so it got everything got suddenly as if there is no lecture today because of technical glitches like that. As if you are having also when you have for example a task or a certain submission you want to do to a client or to anybody, and you find the paper is no longer there, the printer is not working, the network is disconnected, every single problem is there. We need the sound. Fine. Anyway, it will be without sound, no problem. I'm just trying here to, yeah. Keep it. So that it's Lagoon Nebula. This small one is called Trifid Nebula. It's having both blue and red colors. The deeper you go, this is 600 mm. Focal length. You'll find strange features, dust, stars, millions of stars in such nebula. That's the Trifid Nebula. And that's a small project, a small part of a project that I'm working on currently, trying to capture the beautiful night sky from UAE. Inshallah, I hope I will find some time to conclude this project. And the things that I want to do with this project is I want to only use DSLR cameras and lenses without any telescope. So all of those shots are taken with a normal DSLR lens and camera. But of course there is a use of a tripod, which will move with the star. That's slang language. It's called a mount, a telescopic mount, or star tracker. Now, looking at those objects, you can find a very strange fact that such objects are far away to the extent that, for example, Lagoon Nebula that we were talking about is around 5,000 light years ago. So actually, this is how it looked like 5,000 years ago. Until the light emitting from such nebula reached our eyes, it took 5,000 years. So that's Lagoon. Andromeda is 2.5 million light years ago. It's another galaxy, actually, out of our Milky Way galaxy. All those other objects are inside our Milky Way. Andromeda, you can see some galaxies at night, like Andromeda. Look at, for example, Orion, the famous Orion Nebula. That was its shape around 1,400 years ago. And the Running Man Nebula. It looks like a man running. Antares. You can find Antares in the tip of the Milky Way. A small dot, a yellowish dot. You can easily identify it by the constellation or this Antares location. It's very bright, but you cannot see these colors, of course, unless you do stacking. all over and over and over and over until you get those colors. I think there is a slide which will describe, but we are talking about minimum 25 pictures, not less than this. And it requires a very long exposure. So each picture, like 4 minutes. Sometimes you can take a much bigger number of shots, like 250, 300, 500 with less exposure, 30 seconds. So as you can see, those beautiful night deep sky objects are really magnificent. And once you get stuck with this hobby, you can never think about anything else. So even during the day, in every single meeting, in every single moment I'm just thinking when I will be able to go out and do this again. So this concept of millions and thousands of light years can be simplified even in the sun. The sun itself, the rays of the sun, it takes 8 minutes to reach us. So we are really talking about time travel here. So it's not, it's back to the concept of relativity and all of this concept. It's all illusions, guys. So it's all about time travel. The black holes that they found out, the pictures that they took a couple of weeks ago, and everybody talked about it. We're talking about millions and thousands of light years, and God knows what's the details of such things. As time passes by, we will get to know more and more and more. I want also to just deliver a message that we need to be as much as possible adventurous. Try to experiment and try to explore new locations. United Arab Emirates, for example, it might look like a desert, but it's much more than that. There are lots of beautiful places in UAE. Beautiful, really beautiful places, but it's all beauty in the eyes of the photographer. You have to go and try to look for such beautiful places. That's Maliha, for example, in Sharjah. A magnificent place, a perfect mix between rocks and sand and trees. It's slightly polluted, but still you can get beautiful stars. And that's a winter sky. I still have to shoot some time lapses during the summer nights. But always winter is less noisy because of the heat and the... That's the moon rising from behind that mountain. I was testing the Z6. That's from Razin, and the moon is rising. And then you can see the Milky Way rising faintly. And then the dawn. That's a small dot of Carina, which I showed you a while ago. Carina Nebula. That's again the Milky Way rising through the clouds. Clouds can add beautiful element in your shot. That's a full night time lapse between sunset and sunrise. I'm putting here my telescopic mount and the camera, and the whole night I'm spending with one of my friends shooting in order to get one single shot. Now, we still have time. If we want to talk about deep sky stacking, we can close it like that and talk about, ask questions and be answered. Whatever you want, we can do. If you have multiple questions, let us spend the next half an hour or 20 minutes talking about it. Yes? Look, usually, if you want to get a reasonable time lapse, it should not be less than 200 shots. Sorry? Yeah, that's a we'll give you like a minute, or that's a minimum that I feel that it's worth a good scene. More than that, it could be a privilege, but depends on what you need to do exactly. But I prefer to take multiple scenes and to shift my camera differently every 200, 300 shots. You can, for example, like the one in the cave, it was like, I think, 800 or 900 shots because it was from night, sunset to sunrise. So it depends again, but not less than 200. Any other question, guy? Yeah. Everything is in RAW. Everything is in RAW. But in the end, you will post-process the RAW files into JPEG. And then you take the JPEG and you convert it into a video. In order to do that, you can do it through Lightroom, you can do it through Photoshop, you can do it through Premieres, you can do it through After Effects. You can do it multiple ways, but you have to start from RAW, edit the RAW into JPEG, and then the JPEG do it into a sequence and convert it into a video. So always it's starting from RAW.
So each one of those 200 files you're processing separately?
No. I showed you, I think I showed you in one of the videos how we can simultaneously process the same shot and apply the same settings to all of it. So you open the 200 shots or the 300 shots in in the Lightroom. It's very fast. You can do it in Lightroom. You can also do it in Photoshop, and you can edit one shot and then select all, apply all settings, and that's it.
What is the best sequence to do a pano and sequence shot?
Best what? Just
Yeah. What's the best method to do a panorama and a stacking image? Like you're converting to JPEG first for panorama.
yeah.
To use eyes.
Of course, in panorama you have to do like the time lapse that I talked now. You have to process first the raw files into JPEG, and then add the JPEG into the software, the stitching panorama stitching software. So if you add directly the raw pictures to the panorama stitching, you will end up with a raw output. You will end up, sorry, with the JPEG output non-processed. So you will lose the ability to process the raw. So better to do it before. In the stacking, no, it's better to stack directly the raw files and then proceed with that. So there was a question here.
Yeah, you're using the warp tool? Or
Warp.
Yeah. When you use the warp tool, does it lose the pixel of the image? I mean, the quality of the image?
I noticed that sometimes it happens, yes. Sometimes it happens. That's why sometimes I use localized warp. For example, the road. You remember the road, the yellow line? The yellow line? I took a small portion of it, and then I deformed it. But it will not make a big difference, as you can imagine, you know, so it's okay. Yeah?
Is it possible when we are making panorama, we stick 20 pictures or how many we like, is it possible to stick also the Milky Way? That you show us the making the panorama.
Yeah.
Is it possible to also in panorama to stick the quality of the Milky Way the same way?
Yes, you can, of course.
So how we need to process that?
Let me just repeat your question if I get it right. You are asking that in order to make a panorama for the Milky Way.
You know, you show us how to make a panorama. Like you stick, you put 10 pictures.
Yeah.
And you have one panorama.
Yeah.
And you also show us one picture of a Milky Way for the details in the Milky Way.
Stacking.
Yeah, stacking.
Yes.
So is it possible to combine these two?
Both
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Yes, of course you can. But
How to
it's
do
a more lengthy operation. So you have to take each single shot of the 14 shot, for example. You have to repeat it multiple times. The point is, the sky, the Earth is rotating, and the sky is shifting. So you might, maybe at the end of this process, you will not have the same location of the Milky Way with the tree, for example. That's the trick part of it. So in deep sky objects, you trace the object while it's moving with the amount. In panorama, you can still do it, but maybe you can do it with 3-4 photos. But if more than that, you will get a different composition. So I sometimes feel greedy. I want to do everything. Yes, I got what you are trying to say. But in the end, sometimes the time is very important. So for me, sometimes I balance between getting as much photos as possible and the quality. So you have to balance both. Any other question? Yes.
What is the alternative to this equator on a Mac?
Starry landscapes. Starry landscapes. It's actually it's almost identical. It's very close to each other, but it's a paid application. It's around like $40 or $35, but it's worth it. Any astrophotographer is having this software, so you have to get it. It's really nice.
My question is for time lapse. First, the frame rate. Once you're
30.
30 frame.
Yes,
30
we
frames.
notice there is flickering.
Yeah.
And that's happening for two reasons. First of all, the display itself. In order to put this video onto this display in this presentation, I downgraded a lot of the original video in order to make it a small size. The second thing for this issue is trying as much as possible to not to cut the process of shooting in between, so we not end up with gaps. Gaps are a killer to any time lapse. But sometimes you are switching your battery, you are switching your memory card. By time you will get more experienced, you can buy a dummy battery and connect it to, for example, for a small UPS, which will save some power until you change the batteries. There are multiple ways to do this. The flickering issue, there are softwares, plugins that can remove this flickering for you. Adobe After Effects, it removes this flickering and do smoothing. There are now hardware also, a piece of hardware that you can add to your camera and connect it to the intervalometer input. There is a hardware called LR time lapse, I think, which can also control the flickering. It's all about the camera not taking the exact exposure at the same time. So sometimes you will find this up and down in exposure or jumping. So there's a lot of, look, the time lapse is a very broad field, and it requires a lot of learning curve, and there's a lot of things you can do to enhance it. I'm still learning. I'm trying as much as possible to master this field also, so it's fun to do. Yeah? Anything else?
Checking the night sky, like you got photo bill. Any other application?
Sorry?
The application like photo bill.
Say it again, please.
The application for checking the location of the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Photo bills is one of the.
Photo pills, it will help you also compose. So you can, it will help you get a proper composition, for example, about the rise of the Milky Way in between a certain mountain or a certain tree. So photo pills is a very good application also. There's a lot of free software. All you have to do is just to keep on searching. There's a lot. I always try to emphasize the use of free software because it's available for everybody. And believe me, there are lots of things. All you have to do is just to be patient and keep on searching until you find the proper tool. Anything else, guys? So I hope you really enjoyed today.
Thank you very much.
I'm really honored. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Sami, for the interesting lecture, and thank you all for your kind attendance. Please do not forget to collect your certificates at the reception, and we will take a group photo.
Group photo is very, very important, guys. So let's do it.
Thank you very much.